And we're live on, was it 11 May 2026 on the newest episode of The Dictators. And as our very special guest today is our friend Timothy Ash. We haven't had him, or at least I haven't spoken to him for a while, but he's our special guest today on The Dictators. A lot to cover, not really enough time to cover it, but we shall do our best. So, Tim, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks. Great to be here again.
Well, I want to start right in then, since we are kind of, crunched for time, on one of your actually, it's your most recent article, I think, in the Kyiv Post. And I love the title of it, and I want to talk to you about it. How to Survive Another 1,000 Days of Trump. I haven't figured out how to survive the first 1,000 days, but I'm very interested in your opinion as how we should do that. And I love the opening part of it. Well, not the opening part. You said ignore him. That sounds like a ridiculous advice, but perhaps that might be the best way to do. And correct me if I'm wrong. Your thesis is we can't ignore him. You know, he's Trump. He's the president of the United States. However, the media can ignore what he says and instead focus on what the heck he does. So tell me if I'm kind of on base there.
Well, actually, it's a bit embarrassing, right? I think it might be Timothy Gartanash you are referring to. I don't think.
No.
I
Major
know.
faux pas. Major faux pas.
It might be. I don't remember.
No,
Was it Gartanash?
This is you.
Is it? What was I talking about? I can't remember now.
Well, because I looked, no, but I actually know the difference. You're much better looking than him.
No.
That's the major difference. No, because I researched all your articles on Kyiv Post, and you haven't. Well, you're writing a bunch of them recently. Let me just ask you then, in your opinion, because this is the thesis of a lot of people that I respect. Actually, don't for the corporate media in America mostly. I think the UK is guilty of this too. Certainly Europe is as well. They tend to publish everything he says. That, you know, he publishes and speaks such drivel, every hour. He changes his minds from moment to moment. And yet they focus on that. They ask him questions about the last thing he says, which he doesn't even remember he says a lot of the times. I think, and I want to know your opinion then, what do you think about the media everywhere? Just focusing on his damn acts. What does he do, which is inconsistent enough, as opposed to listing and writing and quoting everything he says? Is in your opinion, is that going to be a better way for us to go on for the duration of this crazy person's administration?
Yeah, you probably caught me there, because maybe the Kiev Post republished stuff from my Substack, and they may have changed the title of the
Well, you're
piece.
on the spot then, and not only that, you're live, so.
Good. So look. Yeah. I mean, my general view is that Trump's efforts to impose a peace on Ukraine have kind of gone nowhere, right? I mean, that's the reality. I guess Trump's misadventures have been exposed in the war in Iran. In a way, I guess. Look. The U.S. administration under Trump, I guess, was super confident after the extraction of Maduro, the 12-day war, and I guess in Iran the limitations of U.S. power have kind of been exposed, right? And even the negotiation process. I mean, the Iranians have kind of run rings around the U.S. administration. I mean, I guess it shows the problems when you put people who are not diplomats, are not skilled negotiators like Witkoff and Kushner in charge of really, really important negotiations. We've been through that in Ukraine, right? I mean, Trump came in, criticizing Biden, telling him that, if he came to power, he'd end the war in 24 hours, then 100 days, then by Easter, then, whatever. And, a year, well, more than a year, 18 months on, and we know further in terms of this peace process in Ukraine. And I think maybe, Jonathan, you'll get the drift in Kiev. I mean, there's been a really interesting change of sentiment around Ukraine and in this war. And actually going back to the war in Iran, I mean, the initial take, and I guess it was a fair one initially, was that the U.S. intervention in Iran will basically undermines Ukraine position, strengthen Russia, because basically oil prices would be higher. Russia will be able to sustain the war longer. And then a lot of the missiles and stuff that, Ukraine was depending on, Patriots, etc., would be diverted to the war in Iran. Actually, interestingly, what we've seen is, in a way, Ukraine get advantage from the war in Iran. Advantage because I think what's most notable, I think, from the war in Iran is its impact on unity in the Gulf, the UAE withdrawal from OPEC, the concern, I think, in Moscow now that going forward, OPEC will be less unified, less able to maintain prices, and like a year down the line, possibly will be in a scenario where oil prices are much lower, because there's this competition between UAE and Saudi and OPEC and non-OPEC, etc., for market share. And at the same time, because of this short-term spike in oil prices, we'll see demand destruction. So I think the Russians are thinking they're entering a world that's going to be even more uncertain in terms of oil prices. Yes, they get a short-term boost, but actually they could see a catastrophic fall in oil prices a year from now, right? We could imagine a scenario that oil is $50 a barrel, right? And if sanctions remain in place, we see this 30% Urals price discount. The price that Russia actually gets from oil could be, what, $35 a barrel? I mean, the economic collapse that we've all been hoping for over the last 4 years with sanctions may actually come because of the war in Iran, right, and the collapse of OPEC. And I think the Russians, are understanding of this. And I mean, if the Victory Day celebrations, that was a bit of a whimper. I mean, Putin looked really rough. He looked rough. There was there's a real, I mean, you sense in Moscow now, or Russia, a real sense of a lack of unity, lots of discord. People are really upset about the social media kind of bans, etc. The economy really continuing to struggle, and this big risk factor from OPEC going forward. And then the Ukrainians seem to have, through the use of drones and technology, stabilized the front lines. They're actually pushing the Russians back. These deep strikes have increasing effects. And actually, Ukraine's diplomatic kind of leverage has been enhanced because of the war in the Gulf, because Ukraine has this anti-drone capability that no one else has. Europe has finally got the message, I guess, that actually it's no longer about NATO enlargement to Ukraine. I mean, in a way, that story is kind of obsolete. If NATO is dead because of Trump's actions to undermine NATO, not acting in broader alliance interests, his own interests, the war in Iran, all that, Greenland, you name it, right? But actually, I think Europe has figured out that the key to its defense is not in America. The key to its defense is those frontline states, Finland, Poland, Ukraine, and possibly Turkey. So we're seeing a new refiguration around European defense, and Ukraine's central to that, right? So yeah, I mean, there just feels to be, maybe, I'm not in Kiev as Jonathan is. Maybe Jonathan will pick up something different. But, the irony of, brilliant PR move by Zelensky to issue that ukaz, that decree, permitting the Victory Day parades in Moscow. I mean, what genius that was. And obviously that's something that Zelensky is very good at. He gets criticism for other stuff, but certainly in terms of the whole PR stuff. So anyway, look, to cut a long story short, Trump is pretty irrelevant now to what's happening in Ukraine, right? Ukraine is less dependent on US kit, US military stuff. They're more self-sufficient. Europe has stepped up in terms of financing. Ukraine seems to have a lot of cards, right? And I guess one of my concerns from the war in Iran was that if Trump suffered a defeat, it looks likely he will suffer a defeat. And I'm of the view that this was a wag the dog kind of war. He was worried about the news cycle at home around Epstein, poor poll ratings. He wanted to change the news cycle. That's why he went into Iran. If he wants to change the news cycle again, I worried in a way that he would go back to the peace process in Ukraine, trying to force the Ukrainians to accept a bad peace. But actually, I think the Ukrainians
surely
now will
has no leverage. Surely now he has really
Absolutely.
no leverage over that situation.
No, Jonathan. He doesn't have no leverage. He has no cards. Right?
Zero cards. Yeah.
Trump has no cards, and I think the Ukrainians would say, "Hey, Trump, screw you." Like, this is our country. We're defending we're not going to listen to you. We're not going to accept you. We don't need you anymore. Whatever. We're just going to go on. And thank you very much. But
Tim,
whatever.
before Jonathan chimes in, and I want him to follow up on this, I just read today that Netanyahu was really trying to pressure Trump into launching some kind of a further attack, whether it's a land invasion, Karg Island, further intense bombing on Iran before he goes to China, before he meets with Xi on Thursday. So he's got 2 days to pull that off. Any thoughts on that? Is there any truth to that? And do you think that's going to happen?
Look, I mean, this has been a catastrophic U.S. war on Iran, right? There's been lots written about it, but basically, over-ambitious goals, poor planning, no exit strategy. It's breathed new life into the Islamic Republic, unfortunately. It's sowed seeds of division in the Gulf. You have this split now between a KSA-led group, a Saudi-led group, with Turkey, Egypt, Pakistan, and then the UAE shift to Israel. And again, the limitations of US power have been exposed. There seems to be no willingness from the US to put boots on the ground. I mean, Trump's already struggling in poll ratings, given disastrous US interventions in Iraq and Afghanistan. I think there's no appetite for that. And the Iranians unfortunately have kind of read Trump, right? I mean, they understand TACO, right? And he now goes to Beijing, desperate for the Chinese to basically help him, to give him a get out of jail card on the war in Iran, right? And that's a very weak position. So China will be extracting whatever concessions they can out of Trump. And there's no, the Iranians just think they've got Trump by the balls, basically. And, I'd argue the irony was that the Iranians thought, they had the nuclear program as the deterrent, right? And the proxies, both completely failed, right? The nuclear deterrent got them attacked. And actually, in a way, Trump gave them the new deterrent. The new deterrent is their ability to impact the global economy through control of the straits, and their ability to attack Gulf states, right? Which are very, very hard. It's very hard for them to defend against drone attacks. Again, another other conclusions from the war in Iran and the war in Ukraine is the changing nature of warfare, the rise of the drone, the difficulty in defending against drones. The economics of warfare in terms of low-cost drones versus high-cost anti-drone and ballistic missile defense systems, all those kind of things, right? But in the end, Trump's going to China in a very, very weak position, right? And the Iranians know that, and they're looking to extract maximum kind of pain on Trump and then leverage that in terms of negotiations, right? And the irony, as we all know, the JCPOA was kind of working, and the Iranians probably would have accepted a JCPOA 2 around the Omani deal before this the Freudian slip, before the US-Israeli attacks, and in the end, unfortunately, the Islamic Republic has kind of looks like it's won this battle, and it's had new life breathed into it, and it's unfortunately more radical, more extreme administration, less willing to kind of compromise than the previous outfit, right?
And so jump in there. I'll come to Kiev in a minute, because I think the shoots of the turnaround actually can be traced to the winter. What we're seeing now is just people waking up and realizing and getting the sort of the proof points. But it seems that everything that Trump touches, and actually everything that Putin touches, turns to disaster in the end for them. None of this is strategic, and that includes Putin. Won't one of the long-term outcomes here be to accelerate the move away from oil? Given the behavior of Trump, given the behavior of Putin and the decline of OPEC, it will potentially, even if the price comes down, people are going to be looking for more manageable and secure energy sources.
No, absolutely, right? I guess UAE's decision on OPEC was driven by their assumption that the climate transition was going to happen, and they needed to maximize short-term income flows from oil while they can, to invest in the further diversification of the UAE economy to other stuff apart from oil, right? So I mean, it's like a race that the starting gun has been fired by the Emiratis, and everyone else has got to get in line, right? But again, for Russia, I mean, I always thought in a way that Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine was partly driven by the energy transition, right? I think Putin realized that the golden goose of Europe's dependency on energy was going to run out, right? That he had a limited time frame, he had limited leverage on Europe, and if he didn't move when he did in 2022, if he waited a couple of years down the line, Europe's energy transition away from Russian supplies would surrender that leverage, right? So there's part of that going on as well. So yeah, but I mean, all this in the end, I mean, we'd all agree. I mean, look, this is a strategic disaster for Russia, right? Catastrophic decision. A 2-week war that's over 4.5 years in. Catastrophic military casualties for Russia. The economic impact. I mean, probably the economic and financial losses to Russia from this war must be approaching $2 trillion, right? Definitely at 1 trillion, right? Well, what's $1 trillion between friends, right? But I'd say substantially over $1 trillion already, maybe approaching 2. The long-term damage to Russia's reputation. Who's going to buy Russian military kit now? It's crap. Right, and if you think before this full-scale invasion, I mean, lots of countries were buying S-400s. Turkey, Egypt. Like, who's going to buy Russian kit now, right? So that market's kind of collapsed. Russia's, we've seen, I guess, because of this war, Russia's ability to, its ability to support the Assad regime in Syria. Perhaps Maduro in Venezuela. You could argue even what's happening in the Southern Caucasus, right? Its inability to stop Azerbaijan, backed by Turkey, securing a victory in the war in Nagorno-Karabakh because Russia was too focused on Ukraine. So Russia's generally been pushed back across the board because of this catastrophically bad decision by Putin, right? And you could argue now Putin at home is on the back foot as well, right? The economy is looking pretty poor shape, as I mentioned. Russians are not very happy about the moment, right? I mean, there's certainly more discourse at the moment. Whenever there's a Russian economic summit, whether it's St. Petersburg, elsewhere, everyone's complaining about the economy. No one's happy, and that's good news, right? That's good news for those people like you, like myself, and you guys that wants this war to end, wants Ukraine to survive, and wants some kind of change in Russia itself, right? Wants to change the fact that Russia's a malign act. I mean, another defeat, obviously, for Putin recently was Viktor Orban in Hungary, right? Another. Maybe that's why Putin's depressed at the moment.
And what's interesting, I think, about this is that the shutdown of the internet is not coming from some of the more sort of core parts of the government, like Roskomnadzor, which you think it would come from, which is the sort of state communications monopoly, which typically deals with censorship. The suppression of the internet is coming from Putin's pretty much wing of the FSB, but it's the security protection detail part. It's the ones that provide security for top figures, but especially Putin, are thought to be super loyal. So this is coming, it's said, from Putin's office. He is destroying his own economy. One can only presume that this is out of a next level of paranoia, and not just paranoia towards Ukraine, because I think he can sense, as you said earlier, that they're on the up. There's a mood change. I think that paranoia is just as much stemmed from the internal friction in his regime. He's afraid of his own people and his own elites now. Do you think from what you've seen, that sounds like a reasonable hypothesis?
It just feels that this is the weakest point for the Putin administration since the Prigozhin affair, right? And again, it's weird in a way that it's come when we've all been talking about new life being breathed into Russia's ability to sustain the war by the war in Iran, actually, you sense it's gone the opposite. Actually, it's created real self-doubt in the Putin administration about the longer-term direction of travel and trajectory, right? Which is good news, right? I mean, I'll take that. But as I said, coming on with a newfound confidence in Ukraine, that actually, the drone story, in a way that the manpower disadvantage, or that Ukraine had, can be countered to a significant extent by the use of technology, and Ukrainians have made huge advances in they just seem to have the advantage at the moment, right? And the Russians are on the back foot, clearly.
Yeah.
And we need to use that. The West needs to take advantage of that and exploit that with more offensive actions, right? More aggressive sanctions. Hit the Russians while they're on we're on the back foot, basically.
I think that's the interesting point, isn't it? Because we're noticing this now, as you say, through the lens of the Middle East and the failed tactics there, and the fact that, if it was in Trump's mind to spike oil prices to aid Putin, then that's backfired spectacularly, because yes, the oil price is high, but Ukraine immediately didn't seek permission. They didn't even seek to be forgiven forgiveness. They went and took what is supposed to be 40% of Russia's oil export and refining capacity offline in a few weeks. I mean, that shows, doesn't it? Not just that the US has no cards, but the Ukrainians are now in a position they can give a big slap in the face, not just to the US, but other European governments, which apparently were asking them to lay off, help keep the global oil price down a little bit. We don't know which countries those were, it has to be said, or maybe you do. Ukraine has now positioned itself in its priorities number one, which is extraordinary, isn't it, compared to where we were 4 years ago?
Yeah, look, I mean, again, I think we spoke about it last time I was on the call, but the fact that the US, I guess one big takeout again from the war in Iran was that, and it's a takeout from Europe, it's a takeout from Ukraine, it's a takeout from Gulf states, is this divergence of interests, right? I mean, the US is clear. Well, Trump has acted in his interests in attacking Iran, right? Maybe Netanyahu briefed him or encouraged him or whatever you wanted, but I mean, it doesn't seem to be in US interests. But whatever, he acted in his own interests without consulting allies and against the interests of those allies, right? So for Europe, it's bad news, obviously, because it means higher short-term oil and energy prices. Europe's going to feel the impact there through lower growth and high inflation. The Gulf states, similarly, I mean, a lot of them have had their physical ability to export oil through the states limited, so that's going to cost them a lot. Their security, their whole, I mean, the Gulf states model, the diversification model for the Gulf states has been based on an assumption of security, right? I mean, tourists will not go to Dubai unless it's safe, right? So Trump's actions in intervening against Iran without a well-thought plan, without an exit strategy, that has created more instability, more insecurity in the Gulf, has been a disaster for those Gulf states, again, which is why we're seeing, in a way, this new Saudi-led alternative security structure with Turkey, Egypt, and Pakistan, and actually UAE going to Israel as its security backstop. But people are seeking alternatives to the Americans. And in Ukraine's case, again, US attacking Iran, pushing short-term oil prices higher to the benefit of Russia. This is, for the last 3 or 4 years, the Americans, as you said, have been asking the Ukrainians not to do that, not to do anything that will disrupt global markets. Yet, so it's what is good for the US. So the Ukrainian view is, well, if you're willing to do it against our interest, then why would we feel constrained, right? If we are not using US missiles, so if we're not using HIMARS and ATACMS, we're using our own technology. Like, don't tell us what to do. We'll do what is in our interest. So I think everyone generally is now acting in their own national interests, and they're basically ignoring the Americans, right? And as you said, the Ukrainians have the ability. They have these deep strike drones with great capability, and they're taking Russian volume out as far as they can, right? I think we'll see more of that.
Where does that leave? I mean, this is probably far too much to cover in this episode. Where does that leave states that are either aligned or loosely aligned with Russia? India comes to mind, and they're sort of. You might disagree with the sort of epic immorality of the amount of Russian oil they've gobbled down and money they've handed over seems extraordinarily. But they also seem now to be in a fuel crisis. And then there's Turkey, who has not demonstrably sort of sided with one or the other. Where does this everyone for themselves leave these countries in particular? And is Europe perhaps going to finally step into the breach, as we see with the alliance with Canada, to be maybe a safe harbor for non-aligned countries to start sort of cozying up to?
Well, on the latter one, Rutte may make himself look a fool by going on about daddy, right? The harsh reality is that NATO
very
is
good
dead.
at making himself look like a fool, so
Yeah.
nothing new.
Yeah, I mean, I buy the line that, look, in a way, Russia is this existential threat. The Americans are no longer there. Europe needs to develop an autonomous defense capability. It will take us time. It will take us 3 to 5 years. And what buys us time is Ukraine surviving as long as it can. So we need to support Ukraine, hence the 90 billion of financial support. And we need to hope the Americans sell us weapons until we get to that point where we have autonomous capability. So really, that's what Rutte was, trying to massage Trump's ego. I hope at all that he knows he's talking bullshit. And he's basically just doing it to buy Europe time. I mean, I would hope that he doesn't actually think. He actually doesn't believe.
You can't tell Trump that. You can't tell Trump anything. Whatever you tell him, he doesn't get it. So.
Right.
I'm not so sure about Rutte either. I mean, ultimately he'll be out of a job if NATO falls apart. Maybe that's the explanation for his actions.
Yeah, but going back to the story, so I think Europe does get it finally. I think if you talk to most European politicians and defense-related people, they kind of get that we relied on the Americans too much, and we need to again develop our own defense capability. Germany's obviously stepping up in terms of spending, but it will take time for its military industrial.
Pistorius is there right now, so in Kyiv you may see him, Jonathan.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
He arrived today.
Bump into him in the Irish pub on Maidan.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think what Europe is going to do is we are seeing Europe reach out to sort of middle powers. A deepening Turkey-Europe relationship. I was at the weekend at something called Saha, which is the Turkish defense tech exhibition, and everyone was there. The Canadians, the Brits, all the Europeans. There's a high-level Belgium delegation. 300 business people. The Queen of Belgium was there, meeting defense tech people this week. I mean, in the end, needs must, right? Turkey has a very developed defense tech capability as the the biggest military in European NATO. It helps Europe buy time to get its defense capability up to speed and counter the Russians, right? So more of that, I guess, more reaching out to Gulf states, the Saudis, whatever. I mean, we need to diversify away from the Americans. I mean, that's the reality. Sorry, David. Unfortunately, that's kind of the harsh reality. You mentioned, I mean, Turkey is an interesting one because, I'm a little bit. I was very critical initially in the early days of the invasion, full-scale invasion, about Turkey's support, or I should say, Turkey's compliance, certainly with sanctions, right? But actually, the more I've kind of learnt about it, that the Turks actually behind the scenes do a lot to support Ukraine: drones, tech, munitions. I mean, in a way, the fact that they've maintained this kind of relationship with the Russians, because they have to, because actually they're totally dependent on Russian energy imports, and they're moving away from that. But the fact that they've been somewhat useful to the Russians has enabled them to supply a lot of stuff to the Ukrainians. And the telling point for me was in the 2023 elections, actually. And I asked a lot of Ukrainians at that point in time who you wanted to win, Erdogan or Kılıçdaroğlu, the opposition guy. And they all said Erdogan. I was like, and it was basically because they had actually delivered. The Bayraktar drones, the Baykar drones were kind of critical there. But Turkey's vulnerable because higher energy prices mean they're very energy import intensive, bigger current account deficit, more inflation. But they are winners ultimately in all this, right? Because again, they are going to see more defense cooperation with Europe, everyone in the Gulf states trying to reach out to them in terms of defense tech, all that kind of stuff. As I said, I mentioned already the strategic alliance that's formed: Saudi, Pakistan, Turkey, and Egypt. Turkey is pretty central to that, and this corridor that's been created, a trade energy export corridor now from Saudi north through Syria, Jordan, up to Turkey and onto Europe. So, and India, the Indians, took advantage of the sanctions, right? I mean, they made billions of dollars buying discounted Russian energy. Obviously, they stepped back with the Rosneft, Sibneft sanctions. I guess there's a green light again to buy that energy. Lots of moving parts in terms of these relationships, right? I mean, the Indians, I'm sure, will be very, very annoyed that the Pakistanis have steeled a march in terms of the peace process, etc. And the Pakistanis have played a blinder, right? I mean, playing to Trump's ego about a Nobel Peace Prize, offering the Saudis the strategic umbrella of their nuclear program in the defense, and then being the centerpiece for any peace negotiations with Iran. I mean, give the Pakistanis credit. I mean, they faced a very difficult economic story, right? I mean, in recent years, concerns about default. They need external financing, and now they've pulled the rabbit out of the hat with the way they've played it. So look, there are winners and losers in all this, right? Net, Russia's a loser in my mind, ultimately. Because of this war, what's going, and again, as I said, people may think that's strange, but it's about the longer term oil price trajectory and how global energy markets are going to be managed going forward, and the disunity in oil markets, particularly amongst suppliers, will be negative for Russia.
I think we're going to have to wrap it up because Jonathan is having to go. On one last point, I just want to show you that I'm not totally losing it yet because...
there you go. It is me.
Yes.
These are your words, Tim.
Yeah, but that's okay.
Maybe not your headline, though.
They
caught me off guard.
Yes,
they caught me off guard. I could never remember. I'd never have thought of that headline. So you completely caught me off guard. Yeah, sorry.
I love the headline.
Sorry, guys.
No problem at all. Last point from me, and then Jonathan, if you have anything, or Tim. I agree. I mean, I've been really critical of Europe and NATO and the EU for 4+ years, but I think they're getting it. I put up Pistorius here. He's, as I said, in Kyiv right now to sign a new defense agreement with Ukraine for some facilities, some factories, some mutual arms deals above and beyond what you've probably read about before. So I think they're getting it. Is it too late? I hope not. I don't think so, but they are getting it. And one last thing about Turkey, they also bottled up the Russians in the Bosphorus, which, they should have done. It's an agreement, I think, back to 1923, but they did honor it. I think that was also very, very important. So that's all I have to say. Jonathan, last comments.
I'll wrap up with my thoughts from Kiev, because I think the however history kind of paints what's happened, I think the roots of this Ukrainian confidence go back into last year. In November, certainly earlier last year, at the start of last year, pessimism was extraordinary. There was great pessimism last winter, even though the electricity supplies held pretty well. This year, the harshest winter, Russia's bombardment, you would have thought people would have been on the edge of absolute desperation and panic. And they all accepted that actually things could go very badly if Russia was able to take the entire energy infrastructure. But even through that winter, I detected a real hardening of people's wills. The absolute commitment to just stick with it and not just survive, but push back. But I think the drone tech, the interception tech, has been building. So through the winter, the interception rates have gone up and up and up. That costs Russia because they have to send more stuff over. And now you have other economics. You have Brave One. You have the extraordinary ecosystem that's taking shape. So it's a big part of it is, of course, frontline will and frontline numbers coming together, and Russia's sort of numbers and ratios eroding. But I think, as you know, Ben Hodges talks about, that war is about will and logistics, and Ukraine has been building a system of logistics in the back end that has just started really kicking in, just to the point as well where things like fiber optic, which gave Russia a huge advantage, have become ridiculously expensive. $300, I think it was, for enough fiber optic for, I don't know, I'm quoting something said me earlier, about sort of 25 kilometers of fiber optic, about $300 last year. That's now up to $2,500. So I think you're seeing the tech change, you're seeing the economics change, and Russia getting weaker on every front, including the economic one. And they haven't really built a system behind it. Yes, they've scaled up some of their drone types, but they haven't built an ecosystem to innovate and develop tech. I think this is going to be a fascinating story to tell, blending the front end to the back end stories about how Ukraine came out on top.
I think we're going to have to wrap it up on that note. Tim Ash, thank you as always for joining us today. I hope we see you very soon. Jonathan, all the best to you in Kyiv. I hope it's a very productive and safe visit. Please stay safe.
I hope I get some sleep tonight, but who knows?
Well, and to everyone that joined this live stream, thank you very, very much. And to those who are watching the recording of this, I hope you enjoyed it. We will be back. At least one of us will be back tomorrow at the same time, which is 10 a.m. Eastern time and 3 p.m. in the UK. So that's about it. Thank you all. And you all take care, stay safe, and try to stay sane.